I like that idea. Ready up? Okay, it's 2 o'clock, so I'll call the meeting to order. Let me see. Do we have a quorum here? We do have a quorum. Okay, we'll call the meeting of the Waco MPO Policy Board of May 19, 2022 to order at 2 o'clock p.m. MPO staff, has this meeting been posted? Yes. Yes. Are there councils or courts that should be called into session?
We've just got 2.
We've got 2. So we don't have any of those. Okay. At this point, we'll talk about the public hearing portion. We provide an opportunity for the public to address the MPO policy board on any agenda item. Please complete a speaker's registration card with MPO staff. Speakers will be allotted 1 presentation at the beginning of the agenda for each agenda item the speaker wishes to address. Please note each action item will have a separate public hearing later in the agenda. Speakers have the option of addressing the board at either time, but you only be allowed 1 opportunity to address the board per agenda item. Annette, do you have any registered speakers?
We do not.
There being no registered speakers, we'll move on to agenda item number 3 and consider the approval of the minutes of the April 21st, 2022 MPO Policy Board meeting. A copy of the minutes is provided in your meeting packet. Are there any corrections to the minutes as submitted? Anybody have any corrections on it? Then the minutes will be approved as presented. Today's agenda, we have 3 action items. 1 with the UPWP, which is a 2-year operating budget. 1 with the MTP, which is sort of the long range planning. And then 1 with the TIP, the TIP, which is like a 4-year plan. So basically some general business and budgeting here with acronyms, but pretty basic purpose. Let me take a roll call here first, just to make sure I've got everybody down. Andrea is not here today, right? Keith Bond, Keith's here. Kevin Evans, saw you over here. America's Judge Felton is here today. Ross Harris, hope you came in late. Okay. Mayor Jaska here. Dylan Meek, I think, is on his way. Stan, oh, you're for Stan's right there. Bo Thomas here. Jacob Bell here. Josh Woodard is here. Bert Echterling. Deidre. Oh, quite a bit of you. Okay. Travis Gibson. Will Jones. Judge said he wasn't here. John O'Grady's here. And Alice Rodriguez is not here. And the Mayor Meek just walked in. And that means we need to call our council to order. As well. Okay, which I just did. So we're on to begin with that. We'll move directly to agenda item 4. The consideration and action regarding approval of resolution 2022-7, adoption of amendment 2 to the 2022-2023 Unified Planning Work Program, UPWP.
So the UPWP is the operating budget for the MPO for fiscal years 2022 and 2023. And it accounts for tasks that will be undertaken and the funds that will be used to do this. Amendment 2 revises the current UPWP to allow unexpended fiscal year 2021 funds for the fixed drop realignment study to be carried over into fiscal year 2022 and to also add an additional $48,000 budget for summer interns. So a public comment period regarding amendment 2 to the UPWP began on April 8th and closed on May 8th. No formal comments were received. And the Technical Advisory Committee recommends adoption of proposed amendment 2 to the UPWP. So if there's any questions, I'll try to answer those.
Any questions for staff on that presentation of the UPWP? We talked about this a lot at the last 2 or 3 sessions, actually, as we refined it. And to me, the main points is more $300,000 carryover, right, that we need to keep in the budget. Instead of hiring a whole bunch of people, doctors suggest we get some interns in here to help, which I think makes sense. And updating the planning emphasis areas, the PEA parts of our budget in section F. So that was kind of, I don't think there was anything earth shattering in there, but we haven't talked about 3 or 4 times already. So if there are no questions for staff, I'm going to open a public hearing. Are there any speakers? There are none. I'm going to close the public hearing and I will entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion from Bo and a second from Deidre. Is that right? Keep that. Any discussion on this? There being no discussion, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. That motion passes and moves to agenda item number 5, the consideration and action regarding approval of resolution 2022-8, which is the adoption of amendment 3 to Connections 2045. That's the Waco Metropolitan Transportation Plan, the MT. And I will hand it off to Don.
So the MPO's long-range plan, or the MTP, identifies how the region intends to invest in the transportation system for the next 25 years. Amendment 3 revises projects in the MPO's long-range plan to maintain consistency with the proposed transportation improvement program for fiscal years 23 and 26. And it also adopts transit safety performance targets per FAST Act requirements. So consistency there between the documents. Public comment period regarding amendment 3 to the MTP will begin on April 8th and close on May 8th. No formal comments were received. The Technical Advisory Committee recommends adoption of proposed amendment 3. So now we'll ask for your consideration. So are there any questions regarding this amendment?
Any questions for staff on the new MTP or the amendments to the MTP? They were just my summarization of it is fairly minor and routine. And again, these we talked about in the last 2 or 3 meetings and kind of kicked them around. And I think we're in a good place on finalizing the amendment. So no other questions for staff? At this time, I'll open a public hearing for this action. Are there any speakers?
No.
There being none, I will entertain a motion on this item. So moved. We have a motion by Mayor Meek and a second by Judge Felton. Any discussion on this motion? All those in favor? Say aye. All those opposed say no. That motion passes. We move to agenda item 6, the consideration of action regarding the approval of resolution 2022-9, which is the adoption of the 2023-2026 transportation improvement program. Doctor.
The MPO's improvement program identifies transportation projects and strategies from the MTP that will be programmed in for phased implementation over the next 4 years. So the tip that you're considering for adoption today programs the engineering phase for 10 highway projects, the right-of-way phase for 3 projects, and the construction phase for 1 project over the next 4 years. It also programs the maintenance and operations of the transit system for the next 4 years. So, and one slight revision is the definition and discussion of group projects will also be slightly revised. So the public comment period for the draft tip began on April 8th, closed on May 8th, and no formal comments have been received. The Technical Advisory Committee recommends adoption of the draft 23-26 transportation improvement program. So are there any questions?
Any questions of staff? this one to me, I looked in, because this is the part where we kind of figure out what projects are the most important in Central Texas in the Waco, McLennan County. And how do we match our sources and uses? And so, I mean, if you look at that map on page 61, these are kind of the projects that we're kind of putting in the queue to prioritize and try to find funding for, try to space funding for. And this is kind of a puzzle, what's available at TxDOT, what's available locally, and how you fit the engineering and the construction and the right-of-way procurement. It's an involved process, and I appreciate staff's work in helping get this all put together, because this is kind of the first stage of proving that all these need to be federally approved before we can get funding on them. And so we, again, moving into the environmental and engineering, the right-of-way issues, and the construction. Very expensive, and breaking it all out and figuring out what sources we have to spend these over the course of the next 4 years. So anyway, I appreciate staff's work on this. And are there any other questions for staff? There being none, I'm going to open up a public hearing. Are there any speakers who'd like to speak on this item? There being none, I will entertain a motion to approve this amendment. We have an approval from Becca and a second from Keith. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. That motion passes, and we will move to item 7 in the agenda, the discussion and updates regarding the MPO strategic planning work group. We have Bo coming up on this one here, which I just want to mention as he on his way up to Bo and Zane Dunham and Amy Berlarley, Island, and Lorraine Dupuy, and staff have helped us in this process. And Bo has been kind enough to provide an update to the policy board on how that working group is working.
And don't forget yourself, Mr.
I'm on the
Chairman.
committee.
You're on the committee as well.
I make things complicated for everybody.
So we do have more than just the two of us. Mr. Holmes and I are here today that represent the committee. Amy's here as well. So if you have any raw vegetables that you'd like to throw, I can tell you which direction. You know, come to you now, I think this is probably about the third update as to the types of progress that we're making. And we've talked about some of this previously. We began meeting and held our first meeting on March 4th. Work groups now met 5 times. We're kind of meeting every other Friday. Plan is to have 8 bi-weekly meetings between March and June. Each month that we have an MPO meeting, myself, I'll bring an update as to what we're doing to the Technical Advisory Committee. Zane Dunham is doing the same. We began discussing items as to what the MPO was going to be when it grew up, so to speak, is kind of what we talked about. We talk about its mission, its vision, core values, and goals and objectives. Then we've obviously gotten into some conversation regarding the MPO's funding structure and the need for a structured and transparent process for project call evaluation and selection. One of the things we encountered in didn't show up necessarily only at the last meeting, but the meeting prior to that was what kind of process do we go through as a group to determine, quote unquote, the worthiness of a project, and how and what gets funded and why should it be funded, and then how do we evaluate that? And so at our last meeting, and remember I've mentioned this before, we have Texas A&M Technical Institute helping us with this strategic planning and visioning process. And Amy Gick is she's kind of the chief cook and bottle washer for the group. I mean, she's the facilitator. She's keeping track of notes. She's keeping track of recommendations we come up with and those types of things. And she kind of got us focused off of and away from this MPO structure that solely we only know. Those projects kind of come forward. Those that become most important seem to surface and rise to the top. And then we hope as a group that the bulk of the funding for those things comes from either federal highways or from TxDOT. And so we begin to think about as we change and we move and our populations are all growing, how are we going to receive projects? And what are we going to do with those projects? How do we then, from there, go into the capacities that the MPO has to offer by way of service, staffing, lots of different things. So we're kind of in that process, and we're trying to determine, and we're continuing discussions on this regional identity of hopefully what we're going to become. One of the things we are considering as a group is bringing back a recommendation to the MPO Policy Board that the Technical Advisory Committee develop a framework for requesting and or calling for proposals. And then in that same breath, how do those things go about being evaluated, and what's that criteria look like for the evaluation of those types of projects. Again, we reviewed the MPO funding structure, recognizing Category 2 funds are used only for on-system projects. But with the TMA, we're going to have access to a few other funds, meaning Category 7 and Category 9. Don't ask me which one's which one. I'm still learning that part, okay? But we understand that there could be some additional funding. We also talked about how maybe the MPO needs to adapt to new technology and growth patterns. And I don't know if it was, this is just my perspective, I don't know if it was so much new technology and growth patterns. It's how do we adapt? How does anybody know that we're out there? How do they know how to contact us? How do they know? I mean, granted, we all have, you know, people that tell us things and sink their teeth into us and those types of things. But the reality is for a bulk of the public, they don't recognize what this organization does or how it exists or how it functions. So from there, we also talked about some strategies and improving the MPO's, again, improving the MPO's capacity. How far can it reach out? Who can it reach out to? And what would that look like if it could? On this final slide, you kind of see just a time work of what we're trying to do. We have another meeting tomorrow. And then we probably will have two more meetings in June. Try to culminate these things. Again, Ms. Gick is keeping that kind of in a basket for us and providing us that information. And then we can come back to the policy board with some formal recommendations. With that, be happy to answer any questions that you may have and or defer those questions to somebody who can answer.
Any questions of City Manager Thomas?
Thank you.
I'll just say, I really appreciate y'all's time on this. I don't have a question. I know that it's taken a lot of diligence by everyone on the team, staff, and this committee. And it's so important that we're thinking with long-term vision and making sure that we are growing up, as you said. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mindy. I'll echo that. I mean, there's things that you don't think about, that you think there's things that just, that Chris and Eddie took care of that you really didn't know what was happening. So we're trying to, as Dr. Kumar put some fresh eyes on this and has invited this working group to be formed and sort of refresh thoughts. We're getting a lot of good ideas in that form.
As Waco's growing, and this area, this region is growing, if we're not being strategic and having some foresight for what's coming, then there will certainly be regret. So I think that implementing all the strategy we can is critical. So thank you guys.
We'll move on to agenda item 8, review and discussion regarding the travel time reliability performance targets.
So this is one of the 3 performance targets that we typically in any given year we adopt. And most of them start out at TxDOT, then MPOs typically adapt them according to their regional needs and considerations. And then they go back to TxDOT for the statewide, they feed into the statewide targets. So this one is travel time reliability. Previously, you had adopted a Vision Zero safety targets. We also had TAM targets that we had adopted. This one deals with travel time reliability. I just want to walk you through very quickly. It largely refers to consistency in how we move ourselves as well as how freight moves. And this is part of one of the 3 categories of targets that we set. So the most important one has to do with the system performance itself. And we measure that largely in terms of level of travel time reliability. Then there's freight, which is truck travel, and freight is only measured on interstate, whereas the regular system performance is measured for both interstate and non-interstate, but on system highways. Those are the 3 things we do. Since we are not a TMA and we are also an attainment area, therefore, we do not have to set targets for CMAQ, which is congestion management and air quality targets. So we do not deal with that. Typically, peak hour numbers are what we set for CMAQ. If we were to become TMA, then we will have to set at least one of those targets. So for today's meeting, I wanted to introduce to you the travel time reliability on those 3 measures. And at the next meeting, we have to schedule a public hearing for 10 days on this item. And then at the next meeting, you will consider adoption. So first, very quickly, for Waco metropolitan area, most of the times when we report on average commute time, we typically take the annualized version, and that's what we report and talk about. So for Waco area, we have been approaching almost 20 minutes. At this point in time, we are roughly about 18 or 19 minutes, and it has been steadily growing since 2010. But most of us do not necessarily plan according to 18 minutes or 90 minutes, whatever the annual average is. Most of us remember the worst days of the month, and that's what we typically plan accordingly. And so we end up accommodating for it in some form. So either leave about 10 minutes earlier, or we're expecting some delay. And with I-35, I'm sure that all of us have experienced it and actually practiced it in some form or the other. And so Federal Highway Administration was very interested in finding out reliability measures of one type or the other, because these reliability measures matter not only for our personal commute in the morning to work, but they also matter because almost all the businesses have moved to just-on-time service. So they require some truck deliveries to occur on a particular moment in time, not too early and not too late. Because if it is too early, it typically causes a problem with truck parking and how can they unload the truck, and that causes its own set of congestion. And too late, of course, means the entire production process starts declining. Then we also have some very useful data. So in cardiac arrest cases, for instance, each 7 to 10% is the survival rate decrease for every minute of delay. And so it is crucially important that not only we know what the reliability levels are, but have a plan to actually address them. We also know that when people lose their 30 minutes of sleep in the morning because they're trying to compensate for the unreliable commute time, it results in very cranky workforce and does not really bode very well for labor productivity either. And then to make matters even worse, when we don't get to spend time with our family and friends, that also has very negative impact on society. So travel time reliability are really important. But more than anything else, we should expect our transportation networks to be reliable, just the way we expect all the other networks, whether it is communication network or water, sewer, these are all different forms of network that we use on a daily basis, and we do expect it to be reliable. Some of the items that when we adopt these measures that we consider why they affect our reliability and how they translate back into our project selection, they will be all of these causes of bottlenecks and whether in the traffic systems, work zones, accidents, different events that happen, major events in downtown areas, for instance, and major demand fluctuations from one month to another month. There are changes in that. So Federal Highway Administration started trying to figure out what are some of the best measures for these. So initially there were a bunch of these travel time index. Everything on the left-hand side is what they have considered from time to time. My favorite is the one that actually directly calls it a misery index.
Is it pretty quantifiable?
Exactly. It's a very, actually, it turns out that it actually is very quantifiable. So the way we measure, for instance, misery index is simply you take the worst 20% of your commute time, you subtract the average commute time, and you divide it by the average commute time. And so what is figured out? Yeah. So what it basically means is that imagine, so let's work with 20-minute average commute time. If your worst 20%, they end up taking 30 minutes. So that's 30 minus 20, that's 10. You divide it by 20, that's average, and you get 0.5. And so 0 is perfect, no misery. And as the number goes up, then you know that it's starting to get. It actually turns out that we, in fact, the measures we use is actually some version of that misery index. So what we did was in the MAP 21 transportation appropriation bill, we settled on which measures are we actually going to use. So these are the two measures we use: the level of travel time reliability and the truck travel time reliability. For the LOTTR, we use for both interstate and non-interstate. What we do is that we take 80 percentile, that's the longest, the worst case scenarios, to the 50th percentile, and anything above 1.5 is what we consider unreliable. For the truck traffic, we instead of taking 80th percentile, we work with 95th percentile because just-in-time delivery system for the freight is especially more important. But the truck traffic is only, reliability is only measured for the interstate system. In FAST Act, the one just before the infrastructure bill, all the MPOs were required to establish specific regional targets for each of their planning area. And we typically do them before the TxDOT does that, or that's the standard process every state DOT follows. We report on the system performance every 4 years. Right now, what will be considering is for the 2026 targets, and we can consider mid-course correction as we get more reliable actual data for the current years. Last time we did this was for in 2018, and we had adopted for 2022. This is a map of all the roads networks. So the blue line is the I-35, that's the interstate, and all the red lines. And the red lines are going to be verified. These are the on-system but non-interstate network. There might be some revision as the Federal Highway Administration comes up with new census data and the level of service. So these are the three that I already mentioned. The first two are interstate and non-interstate version of the LOTTR, and the third is for the freight, the truck reliability. So I wanted to walk you through some of the reliability targets that we had set up before, what the actual data are. So everything you see on the left-hand side, the interstate LOTTR, everything in blue is the actual data, and everything in the red is the projected data. The projections are done by Texas Transportation Institute for the entire state, for all the MPOs. And they, at the moment, they're using 2019 data as the baseline year because 2020 data were sort of skewed. We know that that's when pandemic happened. And one of the interesting things you will see, for instance, that the biggest gap between projected and reality is for 2020. And so the blue dot is way high, meaning it tells us that it was very predictable, but we know that the traffic had declined quite a bit at that time. So even though, for instance, I-35 construction had started, but it was not causing any major bottleneck because overall traffic itself had declined. So 2020 data is where you see the biggest gap. In 2021, you notice that we became a little more unreliable as the traffic picked up. Somewhat similar pattern you've seen a non-interstate level of travel time reliability, but that's a lot more consistent because we did not have any major construction. And so left-hand one is showing you the effect of both pandemic as well as I-35 construction.
Are these regional targets or are these statewide or?
So we only do it for the system that exists within our planning area. So that's McLennan County. And these are then adopted into the statewide plan. So a state sets its own target for the overall statewide system. These are for truck travel, and this is the one you would notice that is all over the place. And some of it is because of construction and truck traffic, freight traffic, especially over the last, this goes back to 2014. It has shown quite a bit of seasonal changes as well. Technology has been shifting, the production patterns have been shifting. And so that's what explains some of the actual data, everything in the blue dot to be showing all over the place. And you notice that for 2021, it became particularly worse at almost 1.75. The projected from TTI, those dots are in the blue, and here are these numbers actually look like. So to put that in comparison, what we adopted in 2022, we expected 80% in both interstate and non-interstate for all traffic and 1.75 index for trucks. For 2024 target, we are proposing 80%, 85%, and 1.75. For 2026, we are anticipating it to be slightly worse at 80, 85, but 1.78, primarily because we're expecting a lot more traffic, freight movement within the metropolitan area. And so these are the numbers we have. These are the numbers proposed by TTI, and MPO staff thinks that these are fairly reasonable numbers for us to target. So at this point in time, so of course we should discuss them, but along with the discussion, I also wanted to mention that today we only need policy board to authorize us to conduct the public comment for 10 days. And we'll have public informational meeting on May 23rd at 5:30. Then it will be considered by the technical advisory committee and they will make their recommendation. And then this will come back to the policy board at the June meeting for you to adopt it, modify it, or not adopt it. So any question, comment, or discussion?
Any questions for Dr. Kumar? The one thing I think, if you read the lead sheet on this deal, I think we're not voting on it today, but I guess next month we'll be voting on it. But of the three measures, 885 and 1.75, which we recommended. The last time we did this, we kept the freeways and principal arterials at 80% because of the anticipated congestion on the Mall project. And I guess by taking it back up to 85, we're saying by 2024 that project is done and it'll release, it'll get the numbers back to normal. Are there other projects that, like I said, that would affect non-interstate? I guess there's no giant projects between the next couple of years. So, okay, that makes sense to go back up to 85. That was the only change. Any other questions on this one? We will then move to item 9 and discuss it in updates.
Can we ask for the authorizing us to
Oh,
comment?
is it okay for us to move forward with 10-day public comment period? That doesn't mean we voted on that.
It's not a vote, if anybody has an objection to it.
Informal show of hands. I think we're all okay with it. Gauge the crowd, and I see no negative reaction there. Okay, we're going to move to item 9, discussion and updates from the Texas Department of Transportation regarding significant highway construction within the Waco metropolitan area. Clayton Zacca, Waco area engineer.
Dr. Sitter gonna stay.
I don't.
All right, go to the first. first slide here. Our Waco Drive ADA job, again, this is from Center Point Drive, basically to the interstate. We continue to work on signal installations throughout the project, primarily working on sidewalk between 11th, 12th and the Valley Mills area. Still on track for a completion date at the end of this calendar year. 18th Street or Loop 2, just outside the office here. We're currently working between Waco Drive and the interstate, installing sidewalk curb ramps through that corridor. Again, the limits of it go all the way from 84 to LaSalle. This is another project that will run through this calendar year. FM 185, our widening project between Crawford 317 and FM 985. Contractor is currently installing our pavement on the widened shoulders there. That work will continue over the next few weeks, and we'll wrap that entire project up this summer as well. State Highway 31, and this is the overpass at FM 939. Contractors working on the new eastbound bridge, paving operations in the new intersection, primarily on the north side, along with starting the widening on FM 939 towards Happy Swanger Lane. It's still on track for a completion date of next summer. Spring Valley, this is a project that started the end of April. We've gone in and set a traffic barrier between basically the direct connect to I-35 to Old Temple Road. And what that's going to allow us to do is build a temporary widening on the west side of the roadway. Contractor is currently working on moving some of the existing drainage to accommodate that pavement. That work will continue through the summer and into the fall. One thing to note is we will have a full closure of Spring Valley between Adway and the direct connect. That'll happen later this summer once school is out of session. The duration of that closure is roughly 1 month. State Highway 6 Malden Mall, continuing to make good progress. Weber actually poured the first U-turn structure last weekend. That would be the east to west U-turn there in Bagby. We should start paving operations, if not tomorrow, next week, depending on the weather. I hope to have it opened up this summer to traffic. Along with the U-turns at Bagby, we're working on the new frontage road bridges at the Beverly Crossing. That work will continue through the summer, and we hope to have traffic up and on those new structures later this fall. Along with the Beverly Crossing, we've started installing a temporary steel nail wall to begin construction of the permanent U-turn near Imperial. Again, that'll continue through the summer and into the fall, and we're still on pace for a completion date of next year. I-35. Again, just a reminder of where we're on the project. Milestone B1 is the southbound main lane completion. We completed that work in 381 days of the allowable 443. Currently working in our B2 milestone, and through April, we have accounted for 340 of the 495 allowable days, on track to beat that 495. And then our substantial completion milestone, we've charged 896 of an allowable 1,150 days.
Oh, question.
Yep.
We're almost to summertime, so what would you define late as now? Like, we want to do like an off the record wager? September, October, what are you feeling?
So as we walk through these pictures, I'll kind of go through that a little bit more, put some more definite timeframes. Where? All right, so south end of the project, you can see we've got just a few leave outs to tie in the new pavement to the existing pavement. We anticipate opening the new northbound side of 35 open to traffic early June, actually, in that portion. There will be some on and off closures of entrance and exit ramps as we make that tie-in, but early June, we should have this section of northbound main lanes open to traffic. Direct overhead shot of 11th 12th Street. The bulk of the bridge work is done. Crews are actually tying steel for the new concrete pavement at that intersection today. We'll begin paving operations there next week. Over the next few weeks and months, you should see a few additional crews starting to hit some of these intersections and frontage roads, so a lot of the little leave out areas. In July, early August, you should see a lot of that really coming together.
Meaning vehicular traffic going under these bridges.
So 11th, 12th Street in particular, I would anticipate by July or so, we should have that open to traffic. So you may not have signals and fully operational traffic control devices, but at least open.
We pass through, and then will you address Fourth and Fifth and U Parks as we get to?
Yes, sir. Sure will. All right, looking back to the south, and you can see this is the area I referenced earlier that should see traffic on the new northbound side early part of June. Here's a direct overhead shot at Fifth Street. You can see the bulk of the pavement is in under the interstate. On the west side, we are installing drainage structures. That should last the next couple of weeks. Paving will come in behind it. That one's probably a July, August opening for Fifth Street.
So probably before the school year begins.
That's kind of the goal right now, is to get out of this area by the time Baylor's back in session. That's awesome. Fourth Street, again, similar timeline. The bulk of the work under the interstate is complete. West side is complete. Working that east side to Dutton, and then again, by that August timeframe, anticipate being out of that area.
Question on that, I know substantial completion doesn't always include like landscaping and things of those nature. So, well, I know that we did a tip allocation for some bells and whistles to this underpass. What's the timeline for that, you know?
So you're referring to the decorative lighting. We've got the structures in. We've actually been working with Amy and her group. Those are in the city's hands right now to get all the decorative, I don't even know what you call them, the outer covers installed to that skeleton, so to speak. I don't know if Amy, you've got a timeline in mind when that'll.
Freedom Waco had some questions. I think we all responded to them to the best of our ability. And we'll be meeting with them probably next week to talk about how we're going to proceed and what kind of things we're going to use.
Good.
I think the city will probably be looking at helping funding for some of those because there isn't a budget at this point in time for that.
So I would anticipate close to that substantial completion date that it all kind of runs up together.
But so, do we know if by Baylor going back into session, if that'll be done yet or not? I'm just curious.
I'm not offhand. All right, looking to the south again, this is just another area where the northbound pavement, this is, again, should see traffic in June. University Parks, again, the south side of the intersection has been complete. North side, we're working on the connection underneath the interstate, the north U-turn in both the east and west sides of the intersection. This is an area that, as we have those additional crews come in over the next few weeks, you'll see some pavement hit the ground there. So again, you're probably looking at the July, August timeframe, getting this one open as well. In addition to University Parks, just off the page, we'll be paving the Second Street connection as well over the next few weeks. So you should see it restored late June, July sometime.
In the pedestrian path, that's kind of a river walk that goes underneath both sides of the river under the bridge. Do you have a sense of when that'll be open as well?
See, there's a few barges down there that still have to be moved out. The bulk of the work is complete, so a lot of it will be getting equipment out of there. I would anticipate August, having both sides.
So say again when U Parks opens back up.
So right now, on the east side, that'll be paved over the next few weeks. On the west side, the city still has their utility work going there. So once that wraps up, we'll make our connection into the existing pavement there. So a lot of it depends on when the utility work is completed. But again, I expect it to fall right into that July, August timeframe as well. Brazos River, we actually poured this last remaining section of the structure on Monday night. So as of tonight, we have completed every bridge deck on the project. Looking to the north, this is MLK intersection. The U-turn pavement is in. Sometime over the next couple of weeks, should have both of those opened up to traffic. And again, that same area, the limits of the northbound switch would carry actually up through MLK, past UPRR into the 4th Street area. And here's 4th Street. So again, you can see the pavement that should see traffic in June. Looking to the north, this is the last remaining section of main lane pavement, primarily from 4th Street to just north of 84. There's some pavement work ongoing, along with finishing up the retaining wall there at Business 77. Go to the next slide to get a better shot of that. There on the south side, you can see the retaining wall work ongoing. At Business 77, we're actually working on the far west end, working on drainage connections, installing pavement. On the east side, the first part of June, we are going to go ahead and put traffic on that new concrete pavement headed west on the east side of the interstate. So a lot of changes upcoming there at the 77 intersection. In same areas, looking to the south, you can see we're working on that new pavement between 77 and 84. Currently, the 84 exit is closed, but working on the permit. I mentioned the traffic switch in June. This area here should see traffic late August. Get an overhead shot of 84. You can see the bridge work complete, pavement ongoing. The majority of the pavement is complete in the new intersection and the east and west sides of the interstate. We have a lot of the permanent striping in, waiting for power to be hooked up to those signals, get them up and operational. Then you should see traffic split at 84, hopefully in the next couple of months. Same area, just looking back to the south. Here's an overhead shot of Barron's where we've completed the bridge work, completed the vast majority of the intersection work, minus one side street tie-in. But again, we've got it open to 2 lanes over the bridge currently. There's some barrier wall and pavement work ongoing at the very far north end of the job. That by the July 4th timeframe, we anticipate having 3 lanes open from this area through the north end of the job. And again, just another shot of the north tie of the project. Any questions on the interstate or any other active project?
So substantial completion,
I had to guess a month right now, probably November timeframe.
Now, completion versus like landscape, pretty it up. Would you pull it in a month there? Or what?
Sir.
Would you pull it in a month? Not counting.
So the landscape, we've actually got a longer landscape establishment period that doesn't factor into the substantial completion
Okay.
time period. It's like a 6 to 9 month establishment period by contract.
So November. Okay. Clayton, always a great presentation. Any other questions for Clayton?
great presentation, and I mean, it is really remarkable that we are so far ahead of schedule on I-35. So I just commend you and your team and Weber for really the diligent work that you've done to be able to provide updates, indicating this being ahead of schedule. It's a real win.
Yeah, just thinking of all the angst and trepidation you had going into this deal, thinking that it was gonna be 4 years and probably longer, as you know, every contract deal takes longer than normal. This is coming in either way. Just feels good for 6 months, 7 months out. So appreciate it. The next agenda item is our work group updates. Dr. Kumar.
So, this is one of the things I wanted to bring to your attention, that we have decided to change the agenda structure a bit. And the 4 work groups that we intend to work on initially, we would like them to do a regular update. Now, not all of our work groups have become very active. We only have 1 work group that meets regularly, and we will have an update from the bike and pedestrian work group. But as we move forward by the end of this year, as we hire new people and we have some more capacity, we already have been soliciting names for all these other work groups, and we have a small list going, and we hope to start them getting together and having quarterly meetings so that they can update the policy board and the technical advisory committee for the work that they are doing on a regular basis. So you will notice that these are the 4 that we have begun with: citizen participation, connected automated vehicles, bike and pedestrian, mobility, land use, and transportation. Right now, we only have 1 bicycle and pedestrian work group from which we'll have an update today. Rest of them, we expect to get them started sometime by the end of this year. And so for bicycle and pedestrian work group, I would like to introduce Ashley Thornton to give us an update on the work they're doing.
All right, thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. We had our meeting yesterday. I believe it was the first one that I've been to that Dr. Kumar helped to lead. The group's been active for a long time. I've been out of it for a little bit and just now getting back into it. We had a great meeting. We actually met at Cameron Park and walked there. So we got to test out the sidewalks and the bikeability on the way. So that was great. It was a really good transitional meeting. Dr. Kumar and Annette brought us up to date on some of the work that you all are doing here. We talked a lot about reviewing our active transportation plan with an eye toward making sure we are integrated with all this long-term planning you're doing. We particularly talked about the quickly approaching need for a comprehensive safety action plan And our hope is that by working hard on these plans, that we'll be in a good position to help draw down federal dollars that may become available for safe transportation infrastructure, particularly pedestrian and bicycle. We're hoping to contribute to this idea of a project evaluation framework and a process that will enable our work group to participate more productively in helping decide which projects to prioritize for implementation. So we're excited to hear about that work. We heard just a brief report from Public Works, and Amy, I mean, if I tell this wrong, you can tell me. But that they have hired a vendor to build a database of pictures of over 800 miles of Waco streets, which would be helpful to them, but will also be super helpful for bike and pedestrian planning as well. So we were very excited to hear about that.
Yeah, we're gonna inventory all of the sidewalks and do a condition good fair for, and we're also inventorying all of the bike lanes and the same with condition good fair for.
Yeah, so that was terrific. We thought that would be a huge step forward to being able to make some very legitimate plans. Annette did a great job of reminding us about the My Waco app as a great way to report things that we see on the streets that need to be fixed or improved or thought about. So all in all, I thought we had a really productive meeting, and our homework is to review the active transportation plan and think about how it fits in with all this work. Thanks.
Any question for Mike, pedestrian work?
I'll just comment, Ashley, I appreciate your report and everything you're doing on it. And if anybody's not taking a Waco walks deal with Ashley, which my family has done a couple of times, it's really informative. There's a lot of history in Waco and some exercise as you're doing it too. So I appreciate the feedback, Ashley. Thanks.
I have one thing to that, if you don't mind. We're doing a downtown plan that sort of fits in with what you were just saying. And we did kick off our website that has a survey in there. There's both a written survey and there's an interactive map. And it's called designdtwaco.com for designdowntownwaco.com. And we would welcome anybody's feedback about what they would like to see in terms of parking, walkability, bikeability, street furniture amenities like, park benches and things like that. So please feel free to jump in there and look at our website, and also to ask people that you know or that you work with if they would do that as well.
Is that all one word? DesignDTWaco.com.
Yep.
Thanks, Amy. Next agenda item is number 11, the MPO monthly report document.
Yeah, so this is another agenda item that we have changed earlier. If some of you probably remember something titled Director's Report, and I felt like I was neither directing a report nor was I directly reporting on anything either. So we decided that we needed to change it and call it a monthly report from the MPO. And so if there is any change in the membership that I would like to bring it to your attention, as well as any staffing update within the organization. And today I do have one very important one related to Safe Streets for All program that a notice of funding opportunity just came out. So as you heard earlier regarding UPWP, we have 3 interns who are going to work as temporary staff rather than interns for the entire summer. We also have 2 more positions that we expect to fill during the summer, another senior planner, as well as an engagement specialist. So let me move to this really important one. So I believe several of you here in this room, I know Amy did, Annette and I did, and a few other people, I'm assuming Victor or some in your group probably attended this webinar as well. So there's $5 to $6 billion that have been allocated to this particular program called Safe Street for All. And with $1 billion for each year allocated for this year of 2022. And at this point in time, what Federal Highway Administration had realized that Vision Zero initiative, on which we set some targets here for each MPO, which then fed into this statewide Vision Zero programming goal, was sort of not really doing what we were expecting it to do. And so Federal Highway Administration has decided to put in significant amount of resources to jumpstart the Vision Zero initiative with the idea that, that we have all come across that the pedestrian bike and also fatal traffic crashes, they're all significantly higher. And one of the things that has happened is that a lot of focus in the United States has been largely on distracted driving. So we have been trying to figure out how to fix that portion and a little less attention on some of the other available tools that we have at our disposal. Part of that lack of tools that we have at our disposal is often a comprehensive planning at the regional level for how we think of safety as a system-wide transportation challenge rather than a particular incident. So when we see a particular crash that happened, we typically we try to figure out who to blame. We try to find out whether the pedestrian who got hit was actually at the wrong place. We try to find out whether the person driving was drunk or distracted, but we never think of safety as a system-wide concern. And so that's the idea behind this particular program. I'll go through some of these very important ones, related information today. And so there are three particular type of activities that are going to be funded. So the first one is to develop a comprehensive safety action plan. The second one is to conduct planning, design, and development activities. That is, if we already have a particular plan that sort of addresses safety, but it needs to be complemented, that's the second part. And the third part is the implementation grant, in which if you already have a comprehensive safety action plan that yields particular projects, then you can apply for some of this year's funding from that. The way it was explained during the webinar was that this is the pathway that we need to be looking at. And based on our analysis, we sort of feel like it is going to be important for us to simply to apply for an action plan, which would be called a comprehensive safety action plan. And that will then result in a whole bunch of project proposals that will come out of that. And then we should systematically start applying for implementation grants for all of these projects over the next 5 years. So this is what this process will end up looking like. And this is really important so initially there is this leadership commitment, and this is what I'll be asking the policy board to very seriously consider at the June meeting. And there are two important items related to leadership commitment that, so from Federal Highway perspective, from a high-ranking official at government body, what it means is that each of the city council from all the member government, they will be passing a resolution supporting this effort that we will take at the regional level. And then the second part of it deals with the local match. So this one requires a 20% local match, and it is my understanding that the local match is considered according to the federal regulations. So there's nothing special about the local match in this case, which it effectively means, and if I have different information, I'll share it with the policy board, which effectively means a combination of in-kind as well as budgetary processes. So this is something really important for all members to consider about the leadership commitment. Then if we move forward, we will have a planning structure in which we'll have a work group that will lead the entire effort in the process. And all of our work groups, I would assume, they would be the champions of the work that we end up doing. And then there are planning process inputs, and you can see the goal setting, safety analysis. So there will be a lot of work that we do, engagement, collaboration, equity considerations. And then the outcomes of this really is going to be very specific projects that we will lead and be able to demonstrate that these projects really help us achieve this Vision Zero targets that we had set up earlier. So as I mentioned earlier, that MPOs, political subdivisions of state, basically means municipalities, in our case, federally recognized tribal government or any combination of these entities can apply for it. So in this particular case for us, what it means is that if there is a particular implementation project that 2 or more cities would like to join together and propose, they can do that as well. So for us, some of the ways that we need to be thinking about is the most important part is that we have been too focused on a particular incident. What is important that we think about it comprehensively, because if we focus on one particular incident, quite often it leads to very limited amount of information that ends up helping us make decisions. Instead, these decisions really need to be made at the system-wide level. some of the different ways that Vision Zero has actually succeeded in other parts of the world significantly is a combination of everything from speed management to roadway design to intersection behavior, wherever the conflicts in the different modes of traffic might be, as well as very specific attention to pedestrian bike lanes. One of the most popular ones, for instance, is separation between the bike lanes and the traffic. And also for pedestrian safety, quite often more locations where pedestrians can cross the streets. And the speed, of course, plays a major role. And then along with that, this is a comprehensive safety action plan. What it means also is that we need to be paying attention to weather events, what happens with hydroplaning, the kind of technology we use for road surfacing. And so it's not just about bike and pedestrian, it actually thinks about the entire system, all modes of transportation under different circumstances at different speeds. And that's why they're calling it a comprehensive safety action plan. And so today, I really just wanted to share this information. At the June meeting, we are going to request that policy board formally charges the NPO staff to move forward with an application process. Notice of funding opportunity has come out, and the 15th of September is the deadline to turn in the application.
Dr. Kumar, did you say that the entities that make up the policy board, they're each council or governmental body has to pass a resolution of support?
Ideally, yes. So not all of them, but at the very, so if MPO is going to do it, there are very specific municipalities. It will be useful to have each of the city council pass a resolution, yes.
Before September.
Yes, before September. September 15th is a deadline to turn in the application. So if we're going to move forward with this, which I really think that we should, because this is, I'm quite sure that next time this kind of an opportunity comes along, I'll be retired. I'm quite certain of that. So I do not think that we will have these kinds of opportunities present themselves.
But you're gonna work with each one of the jurisdictions to make sure, for timing wise, make sure we have what we need for the application.
Yes. In fact, the people taking the lead on a lot of this are your respective representatives on the TAC. We had a discussion about this project before the notice of funding opportunity came out at the TAC meeting, and at the next meeting we'll probably formalize. Next TAC meeting will formalize a lot of our strategies about how do we go about which way do we want to present. Over the summer, we also expect that, so there is some amount of data that Amy and her group already digitized for crashes, but we expect to cover that for the entire region over the summer so that we have a map of all the crashes and fatalities and different kinds of conflicts, and so that we can use that as a supporting document as well. So at this point in time, I wanted to put it on your radar. I expect that that each one of you probably will have some discussion within with your respective colleagues as well as other department heads, so that they can have some of the ideas that they can bring forward and we can accommodate them as well. So any question or comment or thoughts?
Just to carry that thought one practical example further for you to think about. One of the things that we did talk about in the tech committee meeting was perhaps looking at getting sidewalks and lighting along Waco Drive that would connect transit to pedestrians and also would eliminate some high accident locations that we have. And would also connect Beverly Hills back to Waco because there is no safe pedestrian walkway to get from Beverly Hills into town. So that would be one that would be partnering with Beverly Hills, Waco Transit. So we should be thinking big about these things.
Any other questions for Dr. Kumar?
While we're at this, I just wanted to mention that that there is another funding opportunity that just became available, which is under the title Reconnecting Communities. And the idea is that several large-scale transportation projects in the past have broken communities apart, in which communities were split apart. So there is significant amount of funding that is also being made available to address some of these challenges that occurred because of that planning earlier.
Thanks, Doctor. Any other questions or anything else in your monthly report?
No.
Move to the next item, number 12, announcements.
So our next meeting will be June 16th. At that meeting, there is certainly one item, the public participation plan amendment, whose public comment period is longer. We'll be voting on an amendment to that. And we will have the meeting at the same location. We'll also be discussing the comprehensive safety action plan in some more detail by that point in time. And any agenda item that you'd like to add, these are the ones that we have on our list. Any other item that you might have, please let me. Or Annette.
Does anyone have an agenda item that they'd like to consider for future meeting? The next MPO policy board meeting is scheduled for Thursday, June 16th, 2:00 p.m. I'm now going to open a hearing of visitors. This time we provide an opportunity for the public to address the MPO policy board on any item of MPO business not identified on this agenda. I will open a hearing of visitors now. Are there any visitors? There being none, we will close the hearing of visitors. And being no further business, we'll adjourn the meeting at 3:05. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.